Welcome to the Pucks with Haggs podcast, a proud member of the CLNS Media Network. Make sure to hit subscribe to the Pucks with Haggs podcast and to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel and turn on notifications for when a new video drops on the channel. This show is also brought to you by PrizePicks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Run your PrizePicks, run your game. I believe this is the 201st episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. So you missed the big bicentennial, dupes. But with me today, I have longtime friends and colleagues, Kevin Paul Dupont from the Boston Globe and Mick Colageo. Mick, please tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
You'll find Rink Wrap on X, Twitter, and Facebook. And I will also appear when the Hockey News comes out with its yearbook issue before the season starts. I'll write the Bruins chapter for them on that.
There you go. Looking for all of that stuff and more. Let's get into it in this episode of the Pucks with Haggs. And I guess, I mean, the first things first, the latest news, Mason Lohrei signs a 2-year contract extension. A very polarizing player with a lot of hockey people, led the Bruins in points, led the Bruins defenseman in points, led the Bruins defenseman in assists. I think he led the team in power play assists. Like, clearly there were some areas where offensively he showed what he could do. I think, best case scenario, he's going to be one of those puck moving power play specialist guys that you can survive with on the ice defensively if you can get it up to a certain level. But he also led the league with a minus 43, which is not great. But like, I almost dupes equate this to losing 20 games in the major leagues. You've got to be a pretty good player in order to lose 20 games, a pretty good pitcher, even to get the chance to be a 20-game loser in the major leagues, right? In order to have the worst plus minus in the NHL, you have to be a certain level of player and a pretty good player to get to that point. Obviously, it shows that there's defensive work to be done, work away from the puck, decision-making, all that stuff to be done. And some people want to move him to forward, think he has the skills for that. But clearly the talent is there. And I think this is a pretty reasonable bridge contract to see what he's going to develop into over the next couple of years.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying there. I will say this, that I felt like I was in aisle 5 at the Stop and Shop looking at prices that are double everything I think they should be, right? and when I saw 3.2 at a quick glance, I said, 2 years for 3.2, $1.6 million. And then I realized, read the sentence again, it's 3.2 a year. So I think for where he is, what he's done, who he is, I think it's an overpay, and an easy overpay for them, right? Usually they got to beat people up to overpay. So there's no beating up. Now, and again, you can argue that it's 2 years, not one. Maybe a 1-year deal would have been, I don't know, pick a number, 2.
You also, dupes, pay for points, right? I mean, you have to pay for offensive production. Like, if a player puts up points, puts up good production, like, that's what you get the money for. It's not being the grinding, great defensive player, like, responsible, all that stuff. If you go out and you show that you're a productive offensive player and that you can generate offense, you're going to get money, and to be honest with you, I almost think this number makes him more tradable to other teams that have seen what, the potential that's there. If they wanted a player like this, I honestly think this gives them cost certainty. If they ended up wanting to move him in a deal, they would potentially be able to do it too. I thought the timing before the draft and, free agency and all that was very purposeful here to make sure that they had something in place where they had cost certainty with him if they wanted to move him. But I didn't have the sticker shock that you did with the $2 million, just given what he's done to this point.
Well, and again, I think they're paying him on promise here. There's a lot I like about his game. I like his size. I like his speed.
Yep.
I like his eagerness to shoot. I wish Charlie McAvoy had half of it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to like there. I don't see that his numbers haven't wowed me, Haggs. If you got him right there in front of you, his numbers
He was the most productive defenseman by a long shot on that team last year, and I know that's somewhat faint praise because Lindholm and McAvoy were hurt.
Yeah,
but like he was the best and most productive D-man that they had, and power play, he led the team in power play assists, and I'm sure he's going to play a much bigger role with Steve Spott coming in and being the architect of that new power play, and just based on what he can do, and he wants to shoot the puck, and he's kind of your more traditional power play quarterback with the skills that he has. I feel like he's probably going to play a big role in this renaissance that they're hoping for the man advantage for next season and beyond.
Yeah, can tell Mick's eager to jump in. You take it away, Mick.
All right. Can you see that screen?
No, not at all.
I can't either. It just completely washes out. All right, I just calculated it. It's $66,666.66 infinitesimal cents per minus. So people love to extrapolate these per point, per goal, per this, per that.
Well, he should have been worse.
Yeah, so I think the obvious premise here with the Bruins is 1993-94 Mason Lohrei is what they believe they'll get, because he was
1993-94.
Did I do it again?
Are you going to the Wayback
last
Machine,
night? I've been really
I thought Mick was about to give us dupes a whopper of a reference to a 93-94 Boston Bruin.
Wow.
I thought that's where we were going.
I just turned 40.
Like John Roloff or somebody. I thought that's what was coming next.
Al the Planet I Afraidy.
Yeah.
Yeah, this will come back, and this will all makes a little sense later, with a little show and tell. But they're looking at the 23-24 Mason Lohrei, the last full Monty year.
Yeah.
Emphasis on full Monty, and in which he was in protected pairings.
Yeah.
Protected matchups.
Yep.
And in which he will be behind a healthy Hampus and a returning Nikita Zadorov as the third left shot, specializing kind of like an early Torrey Krug.
Yep.
And his instincts going through the middle of the rink and ability to shift away from players to preserve possession and create space. Now, under Monty, you move the puck a lot. A lot of people touch the puck before it reaches the net. So there's a lot of plays he was involved in did not turn into assists, because he was wiped off the board by 3 more touches in making some of those plays during 93-94, especially in the playoffs. He was really good that way. So that's what they're thinking. But defensive containment game needs strict attention. He has to get a lot better at playing defense before he plays offense when the opponent has the puck inside the Boston zone. He tends to be thinking offense before he even finishes getting the puck, and a lot of times that makes him vulnerable. So he's like, I'm agreeing with you guys. He's a promising talent, and I think most of last season's statistical disaster was after Hampus was shut down and after McAvoy went out, and he was put in a featured role. And let's face it, they tanked. The 2 ways of tanking for them were to give Lohrei the puck and let him play pond hockey, and to put down in the minors guys that they knew would play both sides of the puck, and bring up guys that they just wanted to showcase.
Yeah, I agree. I guess the question becomes, though, I mean, basically what they're doing here is they're giving themselves 2 years to see what he's going to develop into, and they'll fish and cut bait at the end of the 2 years. But the real question becomes, like, he's never going to be, I think, a top pairing defenseman in terms of playing 25 minutes, in terms of like matching up against the other team's best players. Can he become something that is survivable defensively, where he's not a liability? That's really what it comes down to for me, is can he like learn to at least survive and compete enough to survive when he's out there against pretty good players. The one thing that was also interesting to me is I think it was mentioned, I can't remember if it was Marco Sturm or Don, I think it might have been Don Sweeney that mentioned, I can't remember who it was, but somebody talked about Lohrei playing well when he was with McAvoy, when they were a pairing at points last year, and if that's something they're going to look at as well. And that's interesting to me. I think it puts McAvoy in much more of a stay-at-home sort of, defensive role, and Lohrei is going to be the one that's more of the roamer and more of the guy that's taking chances offensively and trying to make things happen. But your thoughts, I guess, Dupes, I'll start with you on what you thought of that pairing when they were together last year and what you would think if they did that moving forward.
Didn't overwhelm me by any. Of course, not much did overwhelm me last year. So,
right.
Not the place I'd put him right now. In my mind, he's a number 3 pairing at best used, and see how he does develop out of this. Now, number 3, and maybe they flip him up into the power play. And right now he's the best candidate for that. And that's how frustrated I am with McAvoy in that position.
Yeah.
So no, I think he's, I think he's still a project. I would discount entirely that idea of making him a forward, which is what he was as a kid. He's too big. He's got the long reach. He's got the skills. Let's see what teases out of him. I wouldn't put him in a number 1 role. I wouldn't. I think we saw too much of that, as Mick talked about, in an unprotected role, and he got eaten up. And there's really not much defense to his game. If we could get the kind of defense out of him that we saw from Carlo, who clearly was not a menacing figure by any means in terms of physicality, but smart, positioned well, able to defend with his stick, didn't have to go hit people. This isn't a guy who hits people. I still like that in my back line.
Mick?
I think with McAvoy, they have the puck a lot, and that's when they look good. But if the other team has the puck in transition, I can see the Bruins also want to take the pressure off of McAvoy offensively and let him be more Scott Stevens rather than Scott Niedermayer. Yeah. And because I think he's more true to his identity. He's a guy who can contribute offensively and has a formidable shot when he shoots and can make a play. But his game is more his skates so that he can hit. And that's really he's kind of more like a young Scott Stevens in that regard. And so Lohrei might complement him well, but I don't think that unfolds unless the Bruins have a really awesome start, and then they have the opportunity to tinker against a couple of tomato cans at the 20-game mark. And that was something we could grow used to with all the great starts that they've had in recent seasons until this past year, where everything that could go wrong went wrong and more. And so also Lohrei's plight is in part and parcel of that, being part of that war zone of all that went wrong with the Bruins last year. Yeah. And so I agree with Dupes. You start him in the 3rd spot across Andrew Peak, and then you integrate him and try to build him up in bites that he can chew, and then use him on that power play. Maybe Hampus first, him second, or vice versa, and then grow it from there and hope for the best.
Yeah, I think that you got to show some patience with him for sure, and I think he'd be much better off, sort of, especially after the way last year ended, being in a place to start next year where he's going to be able to build his confidence back up after the way things ended. That's going to shake any player's confidence, and that he is a confident kid, Lohrei, definitely confident in his abilities. You didn't see him really changing too much of the risk taking that he was doing offensively and some of the things he was doing, even though
to his credit,
the results were not backing it up. But anybody that finishes minus 43 in the NHL at the end of the season is going to have their confidence shaken a little bit and is going to hear the chirps from people and the criticism from people. So it'll be interesting to see how they use them, but I would imagine it's going to be a gradual usage next year. Dupes, we're at least at the start of the year. Dupes, we're at the start of the real off-season calendar getting going here. Draft, free agency on July 1. With no more hockey going on now, the back channels start to get working and flowing freely in the NHL world. Any sense you can get of where you think the Bruins might be headed? Some have said Nikolai Ehlers would be a nice fit in free agency, and he might be the guy that if they were going to go after anybody and overpay, that would be the guy. Any sense you get of what the Bruins should do, want to do, any players they're leaning towards at this point with the draft and free agency dead ahead of us?
Well, don't go out and get David Backus. Don't go out and get John Moore.
No,
They
no.
have
No
not
Matt
done
Bolesky. No,
yeah, Matt Bolesky,
no.
last July wasn't good. And maybe we're going to see a reset from both of those guys.
Yeah.
Well, the free agency, what I was saying to Mick before the show, would they, and they probably wouldn't, but the place they could really have some fun here would be to trade Swayman.
Yeah. Yep.
And this is the only window.
Yep. And use the Oilers' clear desperation for a goaltender maybe at this point.
Utah's another.
Yep.
So Swayman up there for number 4, get Michelli. And now they've got, now they've got 4 and 7. They could go to the Islanders, get a roster player there. Maybe grab number 1, 4 and 7 to the Islanders. Needless to say, this is all fantasy. But when you begin to look at what their options could be with an $8 million goaltender, and already with the number 7 pick, there's a lot that they could do if they wanted to take a totally different approach. And based on their free agent hires over the years, I would be more inclined to be looking that way. And I am convinced Swayman's a franchise goaltender. But there are other ways to do it. And if you could move up high in the order, come back with a couple of true varsity wingers, have the number 1, number 2 pick, that's kind of exciting to me.
That would be true fireworks in the offseason. And I do get the sense, Dupes, that the Bruins aren't done sort of wheeling and dealing here, or at least trying to, after that trade deadline. I think they still will not rule out much, and nor should they, based on the way things went last year and the way that the ship hit the iceberg.
Right.
And if you can get certainty in some players rather than relying on free agency that's been very spotty, especially with the big money free agents that they've tried to bring in and sign. And let's be honest, their first round picking has been spotty as well. If you can find a way to swing deals where you're getting certain NHL players that are going to help you for a long time, productive wingers, guys that can put the puck in the net, I think you definitely need to think long and hard about that, especially if you feel like you can get something close to the goaltending you were going to get with Swayman anyway, with a couple of guys making less money or equal money in 2 goalies that are making 4 instead of 1 that's making 8. Mick, your sense on all this, the off season and where the Bruins might be headed ahead of the draft and free agency.
Well, there's a million ways to reinvent this whole thing, and that's one of them. But I'm kind of preoccupied with what the Bruins have had to say about it, and that's that this is not a tear down, that this is a retool based on the premise that the market was so strong that they felt that they could trade term, which meant Carlo and Coyle as well as Marchand, and then get back draft capital and prospects, and then come to this point in the season where you make more trades and or go to July 1 aggressively and become a credible playoff team next year. We'll all believe that when we see it, but that's the premise. And so I'm pretty convinced that Swayman's not going anywhere and that they're looking forward to him getting a fresh start. No pun intended.
I mean, now is the time if you're going to do it though, right? Because the no trade is not kicked in until next year. Like you have a short window. It's a tough decision and it's a tough situation, but this is why Don Sweeney gets paid the big bucks here to make that decision or try to. But now, if they have to do it now and they have to make a decision on this based on Swayman coming off his worst NHL season, based on where the no trade language is in his contract, like there's a finite amount of time here, and suitors, probably having interest in him based on teams that felt like they had big shortcomings in goaltending last year. Now is the time to do it if you're going to do it.
To me, it really weighs on what their opinion is of Zadorov's strong second half, Elias Lindholm's strong finish,
Yep.
and Jeremy Swayman's performance in the World Championships, winning the title game with a shutout. Do they take those finishes and those in-season turnarounds seriously? Do they believe which player do they believe they're getting? I think will heavily influence how they look at this situation in terms of the whole team, everybody and everything, including Swayman. But if they believe in what Swayman did and in the Worlds, and they believe in Elias Lindholm's final month of the season and Worlds, and they believe in Zadorov's second half, then I think they're going to stay the course.
Dupes, do you think all of that is fool's gold? Those things that they might potentially be banking on, that Mick was talking about, or do you think there is some logic there of, feeling like maybe they did get it right with the free agents, but it took a long time for them to assimilate and sort of get into the flow and sort of flex their muscles of who they are as players and get comfortable, and Swayman's performance in the World Championships?
Well, I have to say, when they signed Swayman, I felt he's a franchise goaltender. I still don't feel differently about him.
Yeah.
People look at his numbers and the rest of it. Where he came up short last year, time and time again, was those saves. And to get out of the strict analytics of goals against and save percentage, did he make the big save when you needed the big save? That's where he time and time again didn't have it.
Yep.
And that was disappointing. But I still do believe he's a franchise goaltender. So I'd be very hard. The other two guys, do I think Elias Lindstrom is a number one center? Lindholm, I should say. Did it again. I'm like Mick with the years. I don't.
PJ Axelrod.
I don't think he's a number one center, and I don't know if they're gonna be able to. Two thoughts on that. I don't think he's a number one center anyway, as I'm convinced the other guy is a franchise goaltender. And also, having watched those Nordiques teams over the years fade out and then play great over the last 15 games when they were eliminated, very, very difficult to judge guys when the season is over. And it's just all kind of rec hockey, rec as in recreation.
Yes.
So I'm not convinced of those two guys. I would hope for the sake of the Bruins and their fans that they are far better than what we saw from start to finish. And I think the guy who would be easiest to fall into to kind of have it right off the hop would be the defenseman, because he doesn't have to put up points. He did learn some temperance. He did have, a better sense of, when to be out there. So again, I guess without trying to fence it here, I think that's a very mixed bag. And I would be inclined to see what are the most aggressive deals I could make off of the Swayman trade. And if I could end up with 2 or 3 legitimate NHL forwards for him and still have a premier pick, I'd be very inclined.
Well, I guess the question for me, let's get to that after the break, because I do want to continue down this road. I totally agree with you, Dupes, that you got to be very wary of players that perform really well when a team is completely out of it down the stretch. And there's got to be some skepticism with that, or at least clear-eyed view of that kind of production and that kind of performance, especially when it really mattered. We saw them really struggle throughout the course of the year. But I also, you have to enter in that it was their first year with a new team, and that can also, create some level of, underperformance, or players trying to do too much and then they don't play as well, like all kinds of stuff like that. But I think it's a really interesting point that you make. Let's take a break real quick here to talk about PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Join over 10 million users and get started today. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and it's super simple. On PrizePicks, you can mix and match player projection from different sports, combine your favorite hockey players, well, maybe not hockey players now since the NHL season's over, but players from baseball, basketball, esports, and so much more. You can now win up to 2,000 times your money on PrizePicks. PrizePicks now offers Venmo, MasterCard, and Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. And for those of you listening to this episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like, and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS and enjoying all this hockey talk, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Bruins Ringside YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Bruins content with fellow Bruins talkers like Conor Ryan and Evan Marinofski. There's also the CLNS Media Network and Celtics All Access on CLNS, the NBA History Channel, Patriots Press Pass, and the Bruins Ringside YouTube channels as well. Also, please make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a new Pucks with Haggs podcast video drops on the interwebs. All right, getting back to this for a sec, Dupes. You said a couple of forwards. Who would those forwards be in your mind? Because I know the talk about the Islanders and some of the scuttlebutt that's been going on. I know Noah Dobson's a name that's been out there, a defenseman. And I think Romanov is a name that was kicked around a little bit as well. Who do you think would it be? Would it be another member of the 2015 NHL Draft that eluded Don Sweeney the first time that would be going back to the Bruins? Who do you think the forwards would be in a potential scenario like that?
Again, clear fantasy, right?
Yeah.
But I could see jiggling up to 4, send him to Utah, get Michelli.
From Utah, yep.
Yeah, get say Michelli and a second rounder, and you put him there. Then you take what is 4 and 7, and you go to the Islanders and a name up there. I'm looking for youth, right? Youth control. Holmstrom. I think Holmstrom's a heck of a player. And still, and what do you come out of it with? You come out of it with the number 1 pick.
Yeah.
Number 1 pick, Holmstrom. You've given up the 4 and 7. That's the kind of math I'm looking at, and chemistry. Young forwards, early 20s, control, plug right in, produce, and maybe you hit it big on the number 1 pick.
Yeah, and you obviously have to go looking for a goalie or two, probably 2 goalies, or 1. You'd probably keep Korpisalo, obviously, but you'd have to find somebody else. But interesting. Mick, what do you think about those kind of bold moves? And I agree with you, Dupes, that you do need young, cost-controlled forwards that you think can play top 6, can put the puck in the net, like and the Bruins. One of their strengths has been identifying those players, the players that are on the rise, that are getting better and better, and that would be good gets at that stage of their career instead of like trying to get the big fish and overpaying for it. Your thoughts on those players, Mick, and that kind of those kind of deals if they were to come in succession?
Boy, it's a lot of maneuvering and reinventing the Bruins on the fly there. I think my ships have sort of sailed, things that I would have done. And now I think the situation that they're in, that it makes more sense to stay the course than it does to try to reinvent from here. I know that they'd love to have Haggs, but the Islanders want him too, and they got the pick. So they're probably trying to do like the Bruins, who always wanted Gord Kluzak in 1982, but got the Minnesota North Stars to send the Bruins a package in order to get them to agree not to draft Brian Bellows. So they were never going to draft Brian Bellows. Harry couldn't stand him. So they got the guy they wanted, and they got something for it. So I think if the Islanders are out there trying to do something, that's probably what they're thinking, to see if they can get somebody to agree to stay away from a player so they can draft the player that they want. Will they take the big defenseman that everybody says is number 1, who only had a partial season due to injury, but consider him a completely dumb, kind of like a second coming of Larry Robinson, or Chris Pronger? That's basically what everybody's looking at here with this kid. And so he's number 1. Everybody thinks Mies is number 2. And then after 3, I think I love what I've read about this kid, Denoyers. So if the Bruins think that they can find a really great player for their future, then maybe these things are worth looking at. But their attempts to trade up, like famously tried to trade up for Hannafin to get
Yep.
Hannafin, and that
Yep.
never worked
Yep.
out. And then, and as he moved around the league, they still couldn't get their grubby mitts on him. And so, now I anticipate that they're going to try to flesh this out because they believe in the prospect pool that they now have. They got some good young talent. Loesch Mellis is a good player. Um, the teenagers playing at Quinnipiac who had an impact season as true freshmen. Gronwald on defense and Pelosi at forward. These are kids I can't wait to see in development camp and see what I think about them. And let's not forget that they signed the free agent out of Cornell, Dalton Bancroft, to play right wing. He's going to be 25 years old in the middle of the winter. So if you compete and get a guy to play for you, to sign a guy free agency in NCAA that you hope will be your most impactful free agent out of NCAA since Torrey Krug and as Dalton Bancroft, they're going to give this kid every chance to play on that team because there's no way you get him at age what'll be 25 before next NHL playoffs if you don't think he can play for you. So I think that they're pretty committed to their path right now, and they feel like they're doing this right. I think that the real true test comes in how they draft, but we don't find that out for a few years. But B, the maneuvering, that's the big part. And July 1 is a big part because we know that we don't know what Marat Husnadinov can do. And if he's a top 9 NHLer, he looks like he might be. Will Matt Poitras turn the corner and be a third line center in the NHL? And how will they use Fraser Minton? I think he'll play for the Bruins. This is there's just a lot of moving parts here, and I think they're committed to their path. And I don't mind it because I feel like reinventing it from this position right where they are, I think is very tricky. And I'm not in love with the idea of trying to. I almost feel like rather see this through right now than reinvent it myself.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't be afraid to make big moves based on having too much faith on what they currently have on their NHL roster or in their prospect rankings. You got to have a healthy amount of respect for those players and, hope and optimism that, some of them are going to turn into helpful players that might make some kind of an impact. I love the Grunwald kid. I loved him in development camp last year. I think he's a talented player. That was a really good draft pick. A kid from Vermont that's at Quinnipiac. He's a really good player. And I think he will end up playing for the Bruins at some point. You could just see it based on the first development camp as an 18-year-old kid, that the way he looked, it stood out amongst guys that were a lot older and a lot more experienced. But I do think that, now is the time to be bold if you can be bold and to really change things up and to bring in some players that if you identify them, as to Dupes' point, if they really like Holmstrom and Michelli, or if they, pick two other players that they really, really like and are bullish about, in the way they were bullish about, Morgan Geekie when they signed him and brought him in here, then do it. Have faith in that part of your NHL scouting that has done a really good job for this team consistently, over the last handful of years. That you're going to bring in players that are really going to help you, instead of unloading a Brinks truck for a player that you're not sure how they're going to fit, how long it's going to take, if they're going to not play as well here, all that stuff. But I think now is the time to be bold based on what they have on their roster, based on the season that they had last year, and they should be. On the other side of the coin, in thinking about next year's team, they hired Steve Spott, special teams coach, experienced guy. They had talked to Marco Sturm's press conference about wanting to bring in a guy to run the power play. This is definitely something they could have used last year as well. They went from 13th and 11th the previous 2 years, something like that, to 26th in the league. They went 2 years in a row. They scored on 22% of their power plays. Last year it was up around 15% or down around 15%, and really was a liability. Both their special teams were. Mick, your thoughts on Steve Spott, who not only brings the power play know-how and will bring the knowledge and the ability to create something that I think could work, especially with the pieces that they have in place, but also in bringing in a guy in Spott that's got a dozen years of NHL experience, is a very experienced guy to bring onto the staff with a first-year NHL head coach in Marco Sturm, and guys in Jay Leach and Chris Kelly, who between them have a handful maybe of years of NHL experience on a bench. You needed somebody like this, and I think this was a really good hire for the Bruins, and a bit of luck maybe too that Pete DeBoer doesn't have a job next year, because this has been like Pete DeBoer's right-hand man for like a dozen years.
Exactly. And when he became available, it became a no-brainer. And so good for the Bruins to be able to get this guy on their staff, because when you get a first-time NHL head coach, you need that kind of presence on your bench, somebody who's been around the block, who can sit with him in the office and talk about stuff, and be a guy who's got great experience with a variety of approaches to power play, and really maximize what the Bruins have for skill and try to keep them in hockey games that last year they fell out of.
Dupes, your thoughts on Steve Spott?
Yeah, I don't know him, but I agree with your assessment. Assessment I made based off of his resume, but I haven't dealt with him as a guy. I haven't seen him, but it's a vital piece. This might be the most vital piece of all the things we've talked about here. Whether you trade up, trade
Exactly.
around, you've got to have a power play, right?
Yeah.
And even if it's not clicking at 23.7%. At least if it's viable. It wasn't viable last year. There was nothing to it. Game after game, it was just dead guys skating around, and I never had a sense that, okay, you can see it evolving here. It's going to go back to the point. They're going to put the trigger on it, or they're going to go backdoor on a guy. It didn't go anywhere. It was just like another 2
in their
minutes
own net, maybe.
Yeah, 2 minutes of really nothing. And frankly, go back and look at some of those one goal losses, and factor in what another 10 power play goals this year might have done for them. It's such a vital piece. So whether it's going to be Lohrei as a key back there, whether it's going to be Charlie finally summon some, big time Ray Bork testosterone and let it rip, just something there that just gets it going. So good that
it's an enormous opportunity for Casey Middlestat.
Yeah, and again, some guy who can create out there, whether it's over on the half wall, whether it's in the bumper, all the elements that we've gotten accustomed to here. And it came down to time and time again last year. Okay, if they've got a chance here on the power play, it's Pasta.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't him, it was no one. The other thing that we haven't introduced, and this works partially into this discussion, is I think the three of us all assume Geeky's going to be back on a 5 or 6 year deal.
Yes.
Is that our consensus?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
And I hope so. And he would be another guy because of his shot, which didn't get utilized enough on the power play. Some of that is, again,
and maybe he's their one timer. That doesn't have to always be Pasta, and Pasta can create, and they have more than one option to do the one time Ovi shot, because Geeky has thrived. Like Mike Knuble did when they moved the right shot over to the left wing onto the 700-pound line. And that was where Mike Knuble's production with the Bruins took off. And that's what's happened with Morgan Geeky in this era. And it's changed his career. And that would be useful in the power play as well.
Well, and I like the fact that, a lot of his goals last year came because Pasta set him up. And there is definitely a synergy between those two players, between Pasternak and Geeky. And Pasternak.
I would never put those two together in my head, but they work great together.
They really did. And Pasternak was looking to feed Geeky, and especially in the second half of the year, you could see it happening more and more. And I do like that combination, because it's an oversimplification to say this, but it felt like sometimes watching that Bruins power play last year, it was 4 guys standing around watching Pasta hope he was going to do something. And then basically
like 1990s NBA.
Yeah, or just force feeding them the puck, in the faceoff circle, and just hoping for the best. Where
hey Joe, before we go, can we do 1 minute on the uniform tomorrow?
Yeah, go ahead, Mick, please.
It's showtime.
This happened 51 years ago. The Bruins did this. They had this from pretty much 1967-68 through the 73-74 season, albeit the last of those was a V-neck.
Yes.
All right. Then suddenly,
Mick, if you bring out props, I am never, ever going to deny you. You're going to have as much time as you want to go through the props, my friend.
I know he's got a Pooh Bear in here somewhere. Bring out the Pooh Bear.
No, there's no Pooh Bear. But electrified bear, which the Bruins call it, which is referred to by younger fans as Meth Bear.
Yes.
This bear here was on Bruins programs in black and white for many decades before it ever went on to a uniform during the 76-77 season, and only because the blank shoulders needed something after the mass bicentennial. Kevin's in recovery over there. This was the home version of that. Now the away. So the Bruins are doing away with the pinstripe. So basically the new version will be this, but with the serifs of the newest B, and this is now your regular. And the big thing that happened when they moved from the Garden to the Fleet Center, now TD Garden, was Harry Sinden wanted to unify the logo. Montreal had one logo, the Blackhawks had one logo. He wanted the Bruins to have one logo, and that's why we've had one logo that was on both sweaters, except for specialty sweaters. That's finally changing back, and I'm just throwing this as a bonus. This was the 6-team era Bruins gold home sweater. So, and it's got the number 22 for Willie O'Ree. And there you have it. That's today's show and tell. Just to let fans know who think that why are they changing the uniform the Bruins have always had when we went through this 51 years ago, and then we stayed that way for 20 years, and then then they changed the arena and they changed the uniform, and then they changed it back again, and now they're changing it back again, and so that's what happens to this stuff. It's history repeating itself over and over again.
Love it. Dupes, any thoughts on the uniforms?
I have to say, as you can see, I'm such a style maven.
A fashionista.
Yeah, fashionista. That I honestly, I barely notice the differences. I just, and I know it's significant. What I will say is I'm glad that they stay generally the same, that they don't go. I thought the year of the Pooh Bear, I like the concept of it, of using it as a special occasion. I would have used something more ferocious. I don't know if I would have gone to the Meth Bear.
Harry hated that bear. He told me.
Yeah. So
his bear, the Pooh Bear, was the bear that he caught, I think.
Yes.
Well, it was the bear that was hanging up at his golf club in Florida, which I think Bear Lakes. I think that was the name of it. So that's where it came from. It came from the hat, but it sure didn't do it for me. I pictured like a bear that was biting through a stick, almost like the sharks with the sharks.
That's right.
Something really sort of fun. But anyway,
we almost came up with something like that around 1995, the last Brian Sutter year, the last year of Boston Garden, where they had the team bus had that Bruins script. They just rolled it out again with the presentation of the evolution of the logo. There's that thing at the bottom. It says Bruins in script lettering. And that was on the side of the bus back in 1995. And then there came like the little bear sticking out of it with like that, the bottom of the corner of the B. And I thought for sure that, oh my God, that's going to be their new uniform. And thankfully that's not what happened.
Yeah.
So
the bottom line here for me is that if Mick is happy with the uniforms and is that excited about it, I'm excited about it too. Because
let's
Mick
go back to the
knows
gold socks, everybody.
The logos. What's that?
If there's one thing I hate about the current era of the Bruins uniform is Adidas took Reebok's uniform and switched it so that the Bruins socks went black to match the sleeves. And now they look like the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Bruins are imitating the Pittsburgh Penguins, imitating the Boston Bruins, which they did during the 79-80 season when they switched from various shades. They had 50 shades of blue and through the 70s. And then they wanted to look like the Steelers, who were dynastic. They wanted to look like the Pirates, who had just won the World Series in 79, the We Are Family team. And they switched to black and gold. And now the Bruins socks look like they're doing an impression of the Penguin socks and doing an impression of the Bruins. It's awful. Go back to the gold socks, please, with the black outfit.
Listen to Mick. Make it right, Adidas.
Somewhere in this stream of consciousness on fashion, we did touch on the fact that the arena is 30 years old, which is
isn't it? It's amazing. So it's incredible.
Yeah,
it is.
I know it scares the crap out of me that I've seen more years now of the Bruins in the new arena than I did in the old
one.
Oops, I've hit the age where I think everything happened 10 years ago when it actually happened 35 years ago.
So
once you get to that point, it gets really tough.
Especially with
like a long time ago.
I especially feel that way because of the whole COVID thing. Like my reference point has been pre or post, and now I can't remember what's pre and post COVID. So it is a strange time, but 30 years in that building,
I do believe.
Really amazes me, right?
And based on all the build out that they're doing all around it, and those beautiful that Verizon tower where they have their boardroom now and the front office and everything, I got to imagine there's going to be another 30 years of that building too.
Oh no, they'll go right. They'll go longer.
At the very least, based on all the infrastructure that we've seen around it. Kevin, Paul, Dupont, Mick, thank you very much for joining us. This show is brought to you by PrizePicks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS and PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Also, thanks for listening to the Pucks with Haggs podcast, a proud member of the CLNS Media Network. Make sure to hit subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel and turn on notifications for when a new video drops on the channel. Mick, Dupes, thank you very much.
All right, lads.
I'm looking for a surprise appearance by David Pasternak tomorrow to model the C.
There he goes. I like that, Mick. Mick thinks he's going to get named the C tomorrow. We'll see about that. Thank you, Mick.
Nice
Thank you,
job.
Dupes.